You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So Glenn, with Donald Trump becoming increasingly unhinged and desperate in his campaign, the same seems to be true in the New York courtroom where he's awaiting sentencing just next month. What stunt did he just pull against Judge Maron?
So Donald Trump, for the third time, filed a motion to try to get Judge Maron kicked off the case, to have him recuse himself from continuing to preside over Donald Trump's New York prosecution. That's the case in which he's been convicted of 34 felony crimes, and all that is left is to resolve one more lingering motion and then go to sentencing in September. So, Judge Maron just denied this motion for the third time. So that really does clear the runway significantly for the case to move to sentencing, which will be a really big day in the life of the American people and in the life of Donald Trump, because he could very well end up being sentenced to prison time. So this motion was a rehash of the claim by Donald Trump that, Judge Maron's daughter is involved in some sort of fundraising activity for the Democrats. Therefore, Judge Maron has a conflict. But here's the thing, Brian. As Judge Maron just set out in his 3-page ruling, previously he had the New York Advisory Committee on Judicial Ethics look at this and issue an opinion, basically rule that he has no conflict that prevents him from presiding over the Trump prosecution. Nothing has changed. He made clear that this is a rehash of the same old inaccuracies and mischaracterizations that Trump and his lawyers put in their first 2 motions. So Judge Maron pretty easily rejected this motion for the third time. And as I say, we are now headed in the direction of sentencing.
So he's basically saying here that because Kamala Harris is now the Democratic nominee, that all of a sudden he has a basis to try and seek Judge Maron's recusal. If the judge already denied this motion as it related to Joe Biden on the same basis, why would he allow it against Kamala Harris?
Interesting, Brian. He actually didn't have to allow the motion to be filed. Why is that? Because Donald Trump and his lawyers missed the filing deadline, not by a day or two, but by 48 days. But here's the thing. I have seen judges time and again say, you know what? I am going to point out to everybody in my written order that you can't even competently comply with a deadline. However, I'm not going to reject your motion on procedural grounds. I'm going to tackle it anyway, particularly one this frivolous. I'm going to go to the substance of it, even though I don't have to, and I'm going to reject it on substantive grounds. That's what Judge Maron did. So, it's always wise to do that, because whereas the courts can stand on procedure and on missed filing deadlines, they like to give the defendant every benefit of the doubt, every opportunity to raise a motion. So that's why Judge Maron decided to ignore the filing deadline problem and just go ahead and deny it on the merits.
So Trump yet again gets the benefit of the doubt on the same case that he is currently claiming he's being unduly or unfairly prosecuted in. So just to put the cognitive dissonance that he's displaying on full display for everybody here. Glenn, I do want to ask you whether Donald Trump being called a vexatious litigant means that he'll lose any rights in this case. But just first, real quick, a quick note for our Legal Breakdown audience. My new book, Shameless, is now available for order. I've been working on it for the last several months here, and it's finally available this week. So if you're looking to support my work, and that includes the work that we do here on The Legal Breakdown, please click the link right here on the screen or in the post description to grab yourself a copy. You can also grab it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, anywhere you get books. Again, it's called Shameless. I would very much appreciate if people could grab a copy there. Okay, so Glenn, the prosecutor here in this case calls Donald Trump a vexatious litigant. So what does that mean, and does that have any legal significance for him as a defendant?
Yeah, Brian, great question. So let's first of all take on what does vexatious litigant mean. Ordinarily, that term sees the light of day in civil cases, not criminal cases. And when you have a civil litigant who files baseless lawsuit after baseless lawsuit after frivolous lawsuit, sometimes the courts will step in and a judge will rule that that particular litigant is a vexatious litigant and he or she is being prohibited from filing any future lawsuits unless there is some new injury to the litigant, some new cause of action. Rarely do you see the term vexatious litigant used in the context of a criminal case, a prosecution, because judges ordinarily give defendants and their attorneys wide berth to make any arguments and any claims they want. But you know, Donald Trump's lawyers make frivolous claim after frivolous claim, and that prompted the prosecutors to put in their opposition to Donald Trump's third motion to recuse the judge. He's becoming a vexatious litigant. And Judge Maron quoted that language from the prosecution in his ruling, but Judge Maron didn't rule that Donald Trump is a vexatious litigant, which would have implications. So it's really just another black mark, another stain on Donald Trump and his lawyers. It doesn't really have any legal consequences.
Will there come a point where Judge Maron could deny Donald Trump the right to issue these motions because of their frivolity, or could that put Judge Maron's proceedings in jeopardy in the appeals process?
No, absolutely. Let's assume that Donald Trump's lawyers tried a fourth time. They filed another repetitive motion saying, Judge, we think you ought to recuse, and we're not offering any new information or evidence. We just want to go at you a fourth time. I have a feeling Judge Maron would probably say under those circumstances, yeah, enough is enough. I'm not accepting your motion, because now it's probably 60 or 75 days late, plus it is repetitive, and I have absolutely no interest in continuing to litigate an issue that has been definitively resolved 3 times previously.
Okay. And finally, let's finish off with this. Is there, and you know why I have to ask this, but is there anything that will stop sentencing from happening on September 18th?
You know, impossible to predict. We have long awaited Donald Trump to be held accountable for any of his crimes, including the 34 felony crimes a jury of his peers convicted him of in that New York State court prosecution. There is one last potential roadblock, and that is because the Supreme Court issued this, what I deem to be an unconstitutional ruling. They just contorted the Constitution and announced that a president, by and large, has immunity from prosecution, at least for official acts he takes while in office. So, of course, Donald Trump's lawyers filed a motion saying, absolute immunity, therefore you need to throw out the 34 felony convictions. And, of course, the response from the prosecution was, not so fast. Most of this conduct, this criminal conduct by Donald Trump, was committed when he was not president. He was a candidate. Some of it did linger into his presidency when he was writing reimbursement checks to his lawyer, Michael Cohen, who is the one who made the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels to shut her up so Donald Trump could win unfair, indeed unlawful advantage in a presidential election. But, Brian, I'm hard-pressed to see Judge Maron ruling that Donald Trump reimbursing his lawyer as part of this corrupt criminal scheme to gain unfair advantage in a presidential election is somehow magically converted into a legitimate act of a president of the United States. But that is the last impediment, because that motion has yet to be resolved. I suspect you're going to see Judge Maron, I believe on September 6th is the date that he set. He will reject the motion that the Supreme Court absolute immunity ruling has anything to do with the New York State court prosecution, and then he will proceed to sentencing later in the month of September. So we are very, very close. And if I had to lay my $1 bet, that's my maximum bet, I'm not a high roller, I would put the buck on Donald Trump finally being sentenced, I believe, in the 3rd week in September.
Your lips to God's ears. We will, of course, stay on top of all of this as this process continues to play itself out. And, of course, we have 1 month here. So for those watching right now, if you want to stay on top of what happens in this New York prosecution, this New York sentencing, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.